Joining me now is Alabama State Representative Neil Rafferty. Thank you so much for joining us, sir. First and foremost, just your reaction.
Well, with all of the systemic and issues that Alabama is currently facing, this is a non-issue in Alabama. So
why is it a non-issue?
It's a non-issue because if we really want to talk about protecting female athletes, then we need to talk about the two female athletes, track stars, who were shot here, and that we're not dealing with gun violence in a meaningful way, which would be truly and much more impactful and protecting female athletes than this bill does. Currently in Alabama, there are 0 trans athletes. There's not one that's in either high school or at the collegiate level. And the fact is that trans people have been participating in sports consistent with their gender identity at all levels for years. What we see this is just they're trying to put in a boogeyman, and exploiting.
Well, let me push you on that. Let me push you on that a little bit, because first of all, of course we care about women who are getting shot. And if we had hours and hours of programming, we could certainly talk about that. Unfortunately, we're focusing on this particular topic, and we're talking about the fact that, what is it? There's multiple states, 21. We're talking Montana, Idaho, Wyoming, Utah, Arizona, Texas. I know you don't have any at this moment, but I think what the governor is saying, she wants to protect children moving forward, so she's putting this in place because there are women who are unable to compete at the same level as men. She's trying to level the playing field. You disagree with that?
It's not that I disagree with that. I would just say that I disagree with any sort of blanket ban which would violate, the Title IX rule. There's certain organizations, including the International Olympic Committee, as well as the NCAA, that have certain thresholds and metrics in order to ensure fairness, even with athletes who are competing at with their gender identity.
But I live in Georgia. I'm right next to you. I have an 8-year-old daughter. You're telling me that if she competes in track and field, that she's going to be competing against little girls of her gender. You can guarantee me that without the ban?
If we want to make sure that a blanket ban is not going to ensure inclusion or integration in any way, we need to be guiding this conversation with the idea that equality and inclusion for all people to be able to participate in sports and athletic competitions should be shared, as well as maintaining fairness.
Okay, I looked at some polling. Nearly 2/3 of Americans are opposed to allowing transgender women or girls to compete.
Right.
So obviously you and other lawmakers have to earn your vote. This is what the majority of Americans feel. So you have to cater to that, no?
No, well, yeah, so I have a duty to represent, but I also have a duty to make sure that I am standing up for human rights and inclusion and the principles that I ran for office for and was elected for.
Well, I'm all about inclusion, but you can include yourself in the own sport.
Well, I mean, if we want to look at trying to move forward with equality and a commitment to human rights and integration and an inclusive society, then we got to make sure that we're not doing these blanket bans, which is targeting and driving a narrative that trans people are not people that are worthy of equality and inclusion. And I think that that's been the kind of main driver behind all of this is building a narrative that's based off the dearth of information about what trans people are and their humanity, and drives into doubt their humanity. And it becomes a boogeyman. So it's not like this is just in isolation, just a sports ban. There's much more broader implications and forces that are trying to drive a narrative that ultimately dehumanizes trans people, not just from being able to participate in sports, but also from being able to get the health care that they need. And from
you know what, them participating in a 12-year-old little boy competing against a 12-year-old little girl in the same sport, or a teenager, has nothing to do with healthcare. It has nothing to do with inclusivity. It has to do with the fact that they are biologically different and they're competing in the same sport. My husband was a Major League Baseball player. I cannot compete against him. If he were to do anything that I did, I would lose immediately. There's a 100-pound difference between us. That's just simply not a level playing field. You disagree?
I understand that that's how you think, and I'm just saying that there's a larger picture here.
Thanks for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to subscribe. Click the red button to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.